welcome to Some of Each, episode 2. Tonight's theme is horses. So I have loved horses since I was a little kid. I used to do a lot of riding as a kid, growing up in Colorado. I've done some as an adult, but it's a lot harder to come across horses here in Portland than it is in Colorado. But I do have for you here my cowboy boots, which now are mostly worn with dresses to make me look cute. But they have ridden horses. And they're from Sheplers in Colorado, the Western Outdoor Outfitters store, where I got my boots as a kid. I also have a little more show and tell for you here tonight. This is my grandmother's on my dad's side. This is her riding crop, which I'm guessing that she probably used in the 1930s. It's got an ivory, actually, dog head on it. I've kept it for years. It's beautiful. I did use it to race horses when I was a kid, too. So that's keeping us company tonight, too. So I'm going to read to you tonight from some fiction, some poetry, and some children's literature, which is tonight Greek mythology on the theme of horses. So let's get started. So I'm going to start with a part of a story from Vampires in the Lemon Grove by Karen Russell, who's one of my favorite fiction authors. She's written one novel and then a bunch of wonderful short stories. I highly recommend pretty much everything by her. So I'm just going to read the beginning of one of these stories to you tonight. It's called The Barn at the End of Our Term. The Girl. The girl is back. She stands silhouetted against the sunshine, the great barn doors thrown open. Wisps of newly mown hay lift and scatter. Light floods into the stalls. Hi, horsies! The girl is holding a cloth napkin full of peaches. She walks up to the first stall and holds out a pale yellow fruit. Rutherford arches his neck toward her outstretched hand. Freckles of light float across his patchy hindquarters. He licks the girl's palm according to a code that he's worked out, which means that he is Rutherford Burchard Hayes, the 19th President of the United States of America, and that she should alert the local officials. Ha ha, the girl laughs. That tickles. Rebirth. When Rutherford woke up inside the horse's body, he was tied to a stout flagpost. He couldn't focus his new eyes. He was wearing blinders. A flag was whipping above him, but Rutherford was tethered so tightly to the post that he couldn't twist his neck to count the stars. He could hear a clock gonging somewhere nearby, a sound that rattled through his chest in waves. That clock must be broken, Rutherford thought. It struck upwards of 12 times, of 20, more gongs than there were hours in a day. After a certain number of repetitions, it ceased to mean anything. Rutherford stared down into a drainage ditch and saw a horse's broody face staring back at him. His hooves were rough, unfeeling endings. He stamped, and he couldn't feel the ground beneath him. The gonging wasn't a clock at all, he realized, with a warm, spreading horror, but the thudding of his giant equine heart. A man with prim mustache and a mean slouch blundered toward him, streaked fire up Rutherford's side with a forked quirt, shoved Rutherford into a dark trailer. The quirt lashed out again and again until he felt certain that he had been damned to a rural hell. The devil, Rutherford thought as the man drew closer. He shied away, horrified. But then the man reached up and gave him a gentle ear scratch and an amber cube of sugar, confounding things further. God? The man seemed a little on the short side to be God. His fly was down, his polka-dotted underclothes exposed. Surely God would not have faded crimson dots on his underclothes? Surely God would wear a belt. The man kept stroking his blonde mustache. His voice sounded thick and wrong to Rutherford's ears. He's in, give her the gas, Phyllis. The trailer rolled forward, and in 3 days' time, Rutherford reached the barn. He has been stabled there ever since. The barn. The barn is part of a modest horse farm, its pastures rolling forward into a blank, mist-coated horizon. The landscape is flat and corn yellow and empty of people. In fact, the prairies look a lot like the grasslands of Kentucky. There are anthills everywhere, impossibly huge, heaped like dirt monsters. There are 22 stalls in the barn. 11 of the stabled horses are, as far as Rutherford can ascertain, former presidents of the United States of America. The other stalls are occupied by regular horses, who give the president suspicious sidelong looks. Rutherford B. Hayes is a skewbald pinto with a golden cowlick and a cross-eyed stare. Rutherford hasn't made any inroads with these regular horses. The Clydesdales are cliquish and pink-gummed, and the Palominos are inbred buffoons. The ratio of presidents to normal horses in the barn appears to be constant, 11-11. Rutherford keeps trying and failing to make these numbers add up to some explanation. Let's see, if I am the 19th president but the fourth to arrive in the barn, and if 11 divided by 11 is 1, then, let me start again. He's still no closer to figuring out the algorithm that determined their rebirth here. Just because a ratio's stable doesn't make it meaningful, says James Garfield, a tranquil gray Percheron, and Rutherford agrees. Then he goes back to his frantic cosmic arithmetic. The presidents feel certain that they are still in America, although there's no way for them to confirm this. The year, time still advances the way it did when they were president, is indeterminate. A day gets measured in different increments out here. Grass brightens and grass dims. Glass cobwebs spread across the tractor's window at dawn. Eisenhower claims that they are stabled in the past. The skies are empty, he nickers, not B-52 in sight. To Rutherford, this new life hums with the strangeness of the future. The man has a cavalry of electric beasts that he rides over his acreage, ruby tractors and combines that would have caused Rutherford's constituents to fall off their buggies with shock. The man climbs into the high tractor seat and turns a tiny key, and then the engine roars and groans with an unintelligible hymn. Cherubs strumming harps couldn't have impressed Rutherford more than these baritone plows of the hereafter. "Come back! That's not holy music, you dummy!" Eisenhower yells. "It's just diesel!" The man goes by the name of Fitzgibbons. The girl appears to be Fitzgibbons's niece. Rutherford used to think the girl was an angel of mercy, but that was before the incident with the wasps. She refers to the man as Uncle Fitzy, a moniker that many of the presidents find frankly alarming. Rutherford, for his part, feels only relief. Fitzy certainly doesn't seem so bad when you consider the many infernal alternatives. Beelzebub, Mephistopheles, Old Serpent, the Prince of Darkness, the author of evil, Mr. Scratch. Even if Fitzgibbons does turn out to be the devil, Rutherford thinks, there is something strangely comforting about his Irish surname. At first, many of the presidents assumed that Fitzgibbons was God, but there's been plenty of evidence to suggest that their reverence was misplaced. Fitzgibbons is not a good shepherd. He sleeps in and lets his spring lambs toddle into ditches. The presidents have watched a drunken Fitzgibbons fall off the roof of the shed. They have listened to Fitzgibbons cursing his dead mother. If Fitzgibbons is God, then every citizen of the Union is in dire jeopardy. Well, I for one have great faith in Fitzgibbons. I think he is just a just and merciful Lord, James Buchanan can only deduce, given his administration's many accomplishments, that this barn must be heaven. Buchanan has been reborn as a fastidious bay, a gelding sired by that racing great Caspian Rickleberry. Do you know that I have an entry in the Royal Ledger of Equine Bloodlines, Rutherford? It's true. His nostrils flare with self-regard. I am being rewarded, Buchanan insists, for annexing Oregon. But don't you think heaven would smell better, Mr. Buchanan? Warren Harding is a flatulent roan pony who can't digest grass. The president was hell, he hiccups. All I wanted was to get out of that damn White House, and now look where I've ended up. Dispatch for Mr. Dante, hell doesn't happen in circles. This barn is 1 square acre of hell, and Fitzgibbons is the devil. Rutherford lately tries to avoid the question. All the explanations that the other presidents have come up with for what has befallen them and why feel too simple to Rutherford. Heaven or hell, every president gets the same ration of wormy apples. Every president is stabled in a 12 by 12 stall. Maybe we have the whole question reversed, mixed up, Rutherford sighs. At night, the wind goes tearing through the barn's invisible eaves, and he wonders. Maybe the man is heaven, the mobile hand that brings them grain and water. Maybe the barn itself is God. If Rutherford lops his ears outward, the barn's rafters snap with the reverb of something celestial. At dusk, Fitzgibbons feeds them, waters them, shuts the door. Then the barn breathes with the promise of fire. Stars pinwheel behind the black gaps in the roof. Rutherford can hear the splinters groaning inside wood, waiting to ignite. Perhaps that will be the way to our next life, Rutherford thinks, the lick of blue lightning that sets the barn ablaze and changes us more finally. Perhaps in his next body, Rutherford will find his wife, Lucy. The runaway. One day, at the end of an otherwise unremarkable afternoon, James Garfield makes it over the fence. Nobody sees him jump it. Fitzgibbons and the girl come in and groom the horses, and Rutherford B. Hayes overhears them talking about it. Shouting, really, "We'll all be sweetly pickled or run away!" Fitzgibbons' face looks blood-pulsed, flushed from the search, but his eyes crinkle up with delight. Sun up, sun down, Fitzgibbons follows the same routine. Surprise is a rare and precious feeling on the farm. "How do you like that, Angel? We've never had a runaway before." "But where did he run to, Uncle Fitzy?" Fitzgibbons grins down at her. "I don't know." Fitzgibbons doesn't seem at all put out by the loss. Something about the way that he squints into the green mist beyond the fence makes Rutherford think that Fitzgibbons is rooting for Garfield's escape. "Do you think that Garfield will return?" James Buchanan asks now, looking nervous. "Because he must return for the good of the barn. We elected Garfield to represent the Mallards. Who is going to speak on behalf of the Mallards at our next convention? You can't just shirk a duty like that. You can't just abandon your post." "Apparently you can," thinks Rutherford. The other presidents all stare at the dark and rippling air in James Garfield's vacant stall. So if you like it, you're going to have to read the rest. So that's from Karen Russell, Vampires in the Lemon Grove. All right. On to some poetry for y'all. So I've got several poems for you tonight. And I'm going to start with one of my very favorite poets of all time and one of my very favorite poems of all time. So this is Joy Harjo from She Had Some Horses. And I'm going to read you the title poem, which is called She Had Some Horses. She had some horses. She had horses who were bodies of sand. She had horses who were maps drawn of blood. She had horses who were skins of ocean water. She had horses who were the blue air of sky. She had horses who were fur and teeth. She had horses who were clay and would break. She had horses who were splintered red cliff. She had some horses. She had horses with long pointed breasts. She had horses with full brown thighs. She had horses who laughed too much. She had horses who threw rocks at glass houses. She had horses who licked razor blades. She had some horses. She had horses who danced in their mother's arms. She had horses who thought they were the sun, and their bodies shone and burned like stars. She had horses who waltzed nightly on the moon. She had horses who were much too shy and kept quiet in stalls of their own making. She had some horses. She had horses who liked creek stomp dance songs. She had horses who cried in their beer. She had horses who spit at male queens who made them afraid of themselves. She had horses who said they weren't afraid. She had horses who lied. She had horses who told the truth, who were stripped bare of their tongues. She had some horses. She had horses who called themselves horse. She had horses who called themselves spirit and kept their voices secret and to themselves. She had horses who had no names. She had horses who had books of names. She had some horses. She had horses who whispered in the dark, who were afraid to speak. She had horses who screamed out of fear of the silence, who carried knives to protect themselves from ghosts. She had horses who waited for destruction. She had horses who waited for resurrection. She had some horses. She had horses who got down on their knees for any savior. She had horses who thought their high price had saved them. She had horses who tried to save her, who climbed in her bed at night and prayed as they raped her. She had some horses. She had some horses she loved. She had some horses she hated. These were the same horses. So that's She Had Some Horses from Joy Harjo. So next, I'm going to read to you from another of my favorite poets, an Oregon local here, from Dorianne Laux. This is her book, Smoke. And I'm going to read to you a poem called Neon Horses. And for those of you who haven't been in Oregon a long time, there used to be a bunch of sculptures made of neon in the shape of horses along I-5 between Portland and Eugene. And so we used to drive that strip all the time when we lived in Eugene. We drove back and forth, and at night the horses were all lit up and glowing, and it was a little game to try to find them all. So Dorianne lived in Eugene, and so this is called Neon Horses, and the little epigraph is that the artist Martin Anderson built a series of neon horses which appeared in fields along I-5 throughout Oregon. To come upon one, driving toward your lover in the dark, the highway steaming under 4 grooved wheels, the dry hum of roadside weeds, cigarette smoke's ribbon wisped out the open wind wing, radio low, shadow of some small creature careening alongside the interstate. To look up and see one grazing in a field, serene, calm as the moon in the severed dark, bright hooves sunk in black nightgrass, head dipped like a spoon to a pool of earth, delicate spine glowing, blue bridge arched to the stars, tail stroke throwing off ghost light, empty haunch through which the sagebrush, windswept, sways. To see for miles its burning shape, barest outline of throat, foreleg, the imagined fetlock brushed in. The surprise of horse held like breath, horse and what horse means, gleaming like a constellation, lineaments of the true world, cowbird and sugar cube, fallen apple, tractor wheel, torn wheat in its worn treads, silo, hay, the baled sky, ruffled pond from which geese, squalling, lift. The after-smell of horse, rising, feral, floating above the sorrel. The way night knows itself with roses and thorns, buried edges, knowing his arms are down there, electric, spread, his jaw lifted to the kiss on its way, depth to be met and entered, full on his lips, moving toward it. A still joy hovering behind the eyes, as when the living horse is seen, incomparable, massive, universe of horse, too much for the mind, only the heart's dark world can hold it. Crucible moment, muscle greeting muscle, grass, gallop, crushed blossom, intake of voltage, blue horse of the valley, horse of dream, lit chimera distilled from liquid air. So that was Dorianne Laux from Smoke, Neon Horses. Next up, Linda McCarriston from her book Eva-Mary, and I know Keiko's out there watching, so Joy Harjo and Linda McCarriston are both poets that we read when we were at Read together in Maxine Skates' class, so thanks to Maxine for introducing me to both of those poets. So from Linda McCarriston, this is called Healing the Mare. Just days after the vet came, after the steroids that took the fire out of the festering sores, out of the flesh that in the heat took the stings too seriously and swelled into great welts, wore thin and wept, calling more loudly out to the green-headed flies. I bathe you and see your coat returning, your deep force surfacing in a new layer of hide, black wax alive against weather and flies. But this morning, misshapen still, you look like an effigy, something rudely made, something made to be buffeted, or like an old comforter. Are they both one in the end? So, both a child and a mother, with my sponge and my bucket, I come to anoint, to anneal the still weeping, to croon to you, baby, poor baby, for the sake of the song, to polish you up, for the sake of the touch, to a shine. As I soothe you, I surprise wounds of my own, this long time unmothered. As you stand, scathed and scabbed, with your head up, I swab. As you press, I lean into my own loving touch, for which no wound is too ugly. So that's Healing the Mare from Eva-Mary by Linda McCarriston. Right. And now on to another of my favorite poets, my current favorite, Ada Limón. So I'm going to read you two of her books. She's living in Kentucky right now, so there's several of poems about horses happening in her work now. So this is from The Carrying. Poet again is Ada Limón. And the first poem I'm going to read you is called What I Didn't Know Before. What I didn't know before was how horses simply give birth to other horses. Not a baby by any means, not a creature of liminal spaces, but already a four-legged beast hell-bent on walking, scrambling after the mother. A horse gives way to another horse, and then suddenly there are two horses, just like that. That's how I loved you. You, off the long train from Red Bank, carrying a coffee as big as your arm, a bag with two computers swinging in it unwieldily at your side. I remember we broke into laughter when we saw each other. What was between us wasn't a fragile thing to be coddled, cooed over. It came out fully formed, ready to run. So that was What I Didn't Know Before by Ada Limón from The Carrying. And one more Ada Limón for you. This is from her book Bright Dead Things. This is one of my favorite poems of hers of all time. Maybe one of my favorite poems of all time anyway, but certainly of hers. This is called How to Triumph Like a Girl. I like the lady horses best. How they make it all look easy. Like running 40 miles per hour is as fun as taking a nap or grass. I like their lady horse swagger after winning. Ears up, girls, ears up. But mainly, let's be honest, I like that they're ladies. As if this big, dangerous animal is also a part of me. That somewhere inside the delicate skin of my body there pumps an 8-pound female horse heart. Giant with power, heavy with blood. Don't you want to believe it? Don't you want to lift my shirt and see the huge beating genius machine that thinks, no, it knows. It's going to come in first. So that's How to Triumph Like a Girl by Ada Limón from Bright Dead Things. All right, I'm going to give you a couple of my poems and then we'll move on to some mythology. So first I'm going to read to you again from Daughters, my no-cover book, out in 2021 from Airlie Press. These are all persona poems, for those of you who didn't tune in last week. They're all persona poems in the voices of daughters from various characters from mythology and folklore and popular culture. And this one is called Horse Whisperer's Daughter. When you enter a space with an animal, remember you're an animal too. Look with animal eyes. Move with animal bones. When something runs circles around you, something wild and untrusting, hold out your hand. Let the circles soften apart. I've seen my father bring a Mustang to his open palm with nothing but his quiet voice in the dust, his fearless stride, his patient nearing. You can watch trust crest when a horse dips its head, licks and chews, offers its forehead, follows you as one of its own. My brothers, troubled, sometimes tried to stray. One call or another, whatever beasts waited at the end of our gravel road. My father always brought them round, kindness like an instinct, a tender lead rope tethered to his heart. Now, none of us will let my father go. Outside my father's window, the mustangs skim their tails across their backs, snort softly, twitch their hides in the sun. My father coughs. His hands tremble in his sleep. He is strong, I tell myself. He can run and run. The mustangs bump and nuzzle in the heat. My father talks to horses like horses, talks to my brothers and I like we are part horse. My brothers muck the stalls, dig stones out of restless hooves. They have learned when to drop their eyes, when to approach, when to touch, and when to turn their backs. My brothers and I will learn to go on gently, keeping our herd together, do my father's work. His heart is wild against his ribs now, ready to bolt. Papa, I whisper, Papa. I press my face into his chest. Easy now. That's right. Easy. Settle down. Just rest. One more horse poem from me. I'm going to read it to you off this wonderful little broadside. I was invited to do a salon for the creative writing folks at Reed a few years back, and as part of the salon, they made a broadside of one of my poems to give out to folks, which was lovely, this lovely letterpress broadside. So the poem is called Horse Girl. It's the smell coming off of them, the shimmering ripeness, rich earth and animal heat. The way her hand melts into their hides when she runs her fingers along the sinews of their necks, the brown bellow pulse of their sides. It's the warm breath from their soft nostrils, how it hovers around her face and climbs through her hair. The sound of the snorting and stamping, the way their manes fall in coarse tendrils past their ears, the shiver of their haunches alit with flies. The swish and slap of their tails against her legs crisp and growing, she now stands as tall as their eyes. She drapes her arms across their shifting backs. She traces the muscles of their flanks, the knobs of their fetlocks, as she lifts and examines their hooves, adjusts her boots. Their strong hips, her strong hips, the toss of their heads, the toss of her head. She swings herself astride them, takes up handfuls of them, presses her young thighs into the round girth of their sides. The ferocious full speed of their flying, their bodies rippling as one body, the rush of the tussocks, oh, the sun as it comes down upon them with ethereal thirst. It can't get enough of them. Look at them, swift and fierce and bursting with a need they cannot hide. That's Horse Girl line on this lovely broadside. And I actually still have, I'm not getting used to this mirror thing, I actually still have several of these broadsides. So if any of you out there would like one who are watching as a little prize for watching, comment or send me a message and I will be happy to mail you one. All right, so I'm going to end tonight with a myth. So this is from a book I had as a kid called Myths and Enchantment Tales, and I was absolutely obsessed with this book. I read it over and over and over and over and over again, and I was looking inside it today. It's copyright 1960 for one thing, but it also has, I used to put these little book plates in my books. You can see my lovely little rainbow unicorn book plate with my name on it from when I was a kid. So I am going to read to you the myth of Pegasus and Bellerophon. Pegasus was a wonderful winged horse that belonged to Minerva, the gray-eyed goddess who watched over heroes and gave wisdom and skill to all those who truly wished it. Now it happens that after Minerva had caught and tamed Pegasus, the winged horse, she did not care to ride him herself, but knew no human who deserved to own him. So Minerva gave Pegasus to the nymphs to care for until she could find a youth brave enough and wise enough to ride him. The nymphs were happy caring for Pegasus. They brushed him, combed his mane, and fed him, but they knew that someday he would belong to a mortal master who would come and ride him away. At last, in Corinth, there was born a little prince named Bellerophon. Glaucus, his father, had more skill in handling horses than any other man. As Bellerophon grew up, his father trained him and taught him all he knew, so that while Bellerophon was still very young, he understood the way of horses and learned to ride them. All this time, the winged horse was without a master. When Bellerophon was 16, he began to long for travel and adventure in other lands, so he set out to visit a neighboring king. Many friends came to bid the gallant young man goodbye and wish him well, but there was one, named Proteus, who pretended to be Bellerophon's friend, but who really wished for him the worst that might happen. Proteus was jealous of Prince Bellerophon and hoped that the young hero would not return from the journey. It happened that Proteus was the son-in-law of Iobates, king of Lycia, and so, pretending friendship, Proteus gave Bellerophon a letter to carry to the king. Bellerophon, knowing nothing of the wicked words that were in this letter, put it carefully in the pocket of his tunic and rode gaily away. A little picture for you guys. When he reached Lycia, the home of Iobates, he found great sorrow in the land and all the people mourning. Each night a monster called the Chimera came down into the valley and carried off women and children, sheep and oxen. The mountain where he lived was white with bones of his victims. Bellerophon rode through the mourning city and came to the palace of the king. He presented himself to Iobates and gave him the letter. As the king read, his face darkened, and he seemed troubled, for the letter asked that Bellerophon should be put to death. The king did not like to heed the request in this strange letter, yet he wished to please his son-in-law. He knew that to kill a guest would be a wicked deed and against the laws of kindness to a visitor, and might also bring war on him from the land where the young prince lived. So he decided to send Bellerophon to slay the Chimera, thinking he never could come back alive. Bellerophon was not the least bit afraid, because he longed for adventure, and his heart was filled with a great desire to overcome this dark and evil monster, free the kingdom from fear, and make the mourning people happy. But before starting out, he found the oldest and wisest man in the whole kingdom and asked his advice. This aged man was named Polyidus. When he saw that Bellerophon was young and full of courage, yet humble enough to ask help from someone older, Polyidus told him a secret that no one else in the kingdom knew. He told him of Minerva's winged horse, which he had once seen drinking at a spring deep in the forest. "If you sleep all night in Minerva's temple," said the old man, "and offer gifts at her altar, she may help you to find the horse." Bellerophon went to the temple, and as he slept he dreamed that he saw Minerva clad in silver armor, her gray eyes shining as if they held sparks of fire. Plumes of blue and rose and violet floated from her helmet. She carried a golden bridle in her hand and told Bellerophon how he might reach the well where Pegasus came to drink. When Bellerophon awakened, he saw the golden bridle on the temple floor beside him and knew that Minerva really had visited him. Then, with the bridle over his arm, he set out on his journey through the forest. When he found the well, he hid himself among the bushes nearby to watch for the coming of the winged horse. Soon Bellerophon saw the winged horse flying far up in the sky. Nearer and nearer he wheeled until his silver feet touched the green grass beside the spring. As Pegasus bent his head to drink, Bellerophon sprang from his hiding place and caught him by the mane. Before Pegasus knew what had happened, the golden bridle was slipped over his head, and Bellerophon had leaped to his back and was sitting between his outspread wings. Pegasus rode into the air and darted wildly through the sky, now flying high among the clouds, now diving swiftly toward the earth. He reared and plunged, trying to shake Bellerophon from his back. He flew wildly over the sea and the mountains, all the way to Africa and back. He flew over Thebes and over Corinth, and people looking up into the sky thought they saw some strange bird passing overhead. But Bellerophon understood how to handle fierce horses, for he remembered the things his father had taught him. At last Pegasus knew he had found his master, and tired and panting, sank down to the grass beside the well. After Pegasus had rested, Bellerophon armed himself with a long spear and rode toward the mountain where the Chimera lived. There, on a ledge of rock outside his cave, the monster lay basking in the sunlight. He was partly like a lion and partly like a dragon. He lay with his lion's head resting between his paws and his long green tail like that of a lizard curled around him. Bellerophon rode his horse as near as he dared to the ledge on which the dragon lay, then raised his spear to strike at the Chimera. But the great beast blew out clouds of smoke and fire, and Pegasus drew back in terror. As the monster drew in his breath for another puff, Bellerophon rode close to the ledge and with one strong thrust sent his spear through the heart of the Chimera. When the young prince came back to the palace, riding the winged horse and carrying the head of the dreadful Chimera, there was wild rejoicing in Lycia. Everyone admired and praised Bellerophon and crowded around the wonderful horse, amazed at his wings and his silver feet. The young daughter of King Iobates, who came out on the portico of the palace to see the hero and his horse, fell in love with Bellerophon the moment she saw the young warrior sitting so proudly between the white wings of Pegasus. King Iobates led her to Bellerophon and gave her to him for his bride. For a long time they were happy together. Bellerophon and Pegasus went on many adventures, and when Iobates died, Bellerophon became king. At last, one day, Bellerophon thought of a most daring adventure. He decided he would try to ride Pegasus to Mount Olympus and visit the gods. Minerva appeared and warned him that the gods would be angry, but he mounted his horse and rode high into the clouds, urging Pegasus up toward the summit of Mount Olympus. Jupiter, chief of the gods, looked down and, seeing the horse approaching, was angry to think that any mortal should dare approach the home of the gods. He caused a gadfly to light on Pegasus and sting his neck, his shoulders, and his nose. Pegasus was so startled by this that at once he reared and wheeled among the clouds, leaping wildly in the air, and Bellerophon was thrown from his back and dropped down to earth. Minerva, causing him to land where the ground was soft, spared his life, but as long as he lived, Bellerophon wandered, crippled and lonely, seeking all over the earth for his wonderful winged horse. But Pegasus never again returned to him. Other little factoid about Pegasus is that he sprang from Medusa's head when Medusa was beheaded, along with a giant. So that was from Myths and Enchantment Tales, the myth of Pegasus and Bellerophon. So thanks for tuning in this evening for all of this wonderful stuff about horses. A little review of what you heard. We read the story, part of the story from Vampires in the Lemon Grove by Karen Russell called, I'm looking for the name of the story here, called, I can't find it at all. Okay, I'm going to show you the book. The Barn at the End of Our Term. Vampires in the Lemon Grove by Karen Russell. And then we read from the poets Joy Harjo, She Had Some Horses. Dorianne Laux from Smoke. Linda McCarriston from Eva-Mary. And two poems from Ada Limón, from The Carrying and Bright Dead Things. And then I read you a couple of my own, and we ended with this lovely myth from Pegasus and Bellerophon. So anyway, horses this evening, and if you liked any of that, if you want to read the rest of that story, please support your local bookstores in this really difficult time. Order online from them, or some of them are doing curbside pickup, so you can get any of those books for them, and I hope you enjoy reading, and giddy up. Good night, y'all.